Everybody. Hello, sir.
How are you?
Yeah. It's good to have you, sir.
Same here. Thank you. There is this agitation from a section of the population that Nigeria needs a new constitution. It's called the People's Constitution, or the People's Democratic Constitution, that will allow for the people to have a say in the contents of the legal documents that binds us as a people. So my question is this the right way to go now to address the issues that we face as a people?
What is a constitution? Now, people have a lot of interpretation to that question. And the perception of people about what a constitution is what informs the agitation for what they call people's constitution. When you look at the constitution, depending on the country, it's a legal document that tends to reduce into writing the basic principles for the existence of the people in terms of the organs of government, the powers to exercise the institution, and of course the relationship between the government and the people. And of course in Nigeria, securing a right to the people in order to protect it against the government. Now when you look at this conceptual definition, and you look at the constitutions that we have had, you'll find out that the written form of the constitution is just the reducible minimum of what the constitution is. In constitutional law, we talk about the visible and the invisible constitution. You know, the visible constitution is what people are talking about. But the invisible constitution are the things that really makes the constitution to work that are not stated in the constitution. You will hardly ever find constitutional document stating these seemingly invisible principles which we extract from constitutional law, political science, philosophy, values, ideology, and all that. But they are reflected in the provisions of the Constitution. And more importantly, the application and operation of the Constitution is also dependent upon the interpretation of the institutions created by the Constitution. So for instance, in the Nigerian Constitution, there are 3 arms of government. There is the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. And don't forget also that we run a federal system with 36 states and a federal capital territory. So that starts to give you the complexity of the society that we run. And then when you look at this constitution and the institution, there's also a layered principle in the invisibility of constitutional provisions, which we call the concept of constitutional illiteracy. You know, the concept of constitutional illiteracy comes when you give something to somebody and he doesn't even know what it's meant for. So you find that in Nigeria, there's a lot of constitutional illiteracy. And people start to, argue out of that illiteracy. And when you look at them, you find out that they do not know what they have. In most cases, some young people do not even know what their father has prepared for them. And as a result of that, they start to shipwreck their future. And that's the case in Nigeria. The problem is not always with the Constitution. The problem is with the institution and the leadership that is supposed to guide the institution for the Constitution to function. Because the Constitution will not contain every little thing that needs to make the Constitution function. So when you talk about the Constitution, there are guardrails that undergirds the constitutional framework. There is even the presumption of the existence of some fertilizer constitutional elements that nourishes the constitutional democratic governance. You have what we call democratic values. You know, if you don't have democratic values, you can't give democratic government or democratic governance. And in these democratic values, the Constitution relies heavily on the party system, the political process, as opposed to the legal process. And unfortunately, most times we reduce our Constitution to the legal process. And for instance, that leads to incongruity in the sense that instead of the political process functioning for our electoral system, our reliance on the legal process undermines the constitutional framework to the extent that judges are now the people that determine who to elect to us, with the outcome that at some point there's even a discordance between the decisions of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court with respect to a particular state as to the outcome of the election. So when you're talking about the Constitution, I think people need to be educated so that we don't start to agitate for things that we already have. It's like the fad we have in Nigeria for fashion, for cars, for technology. A lot of people buy iPhones. They don't use 1/10 of the functions there. And they always want to keep up buying iPhone 16, iPhone 15. You will stay with iPhone 10 or iPhone this. It will serve all your functions. And that is how I see sometimes the agitation for constitutional amendment. Is our problem the Constitution? Or is it the way we operate the Constitution? Is our problem the constitutional framework or the way we have destroyed the constitutional framework with the operation of the Constitution? Is our Constitution, is the Constitution the problem or the personnel or the leadership to, after all, the Constitution frowns against corruption. And most of our governments are rapidly corrupt. Does the Constitution preach accountability? Yes, but we subvert this. Does the Constitution preach people being above the law? No, but most people in government are above the law. So when you look at our constitutional governance and our constitutional history, it is just like the saying, we have seen the enemy, and the enemy is us. I dare say the Constitution may not be the enemy.